Welcome back, everyone. We've had some massive Aussie success overseas this past week. We have also had a major announcement in the WNBL. And to talk about this big news, we have two very special guests jumping on board with us later. They are both Olympians as well as former WNBL players and have both worked or are working in the Australian Basketball Players Association. So we'll be getting some great insight today. First off, we need to start with some breaking news. Washington Mystics have just released that Georgia Amor, our young Aussie who is pick number 6 in the draft, has just suffered an ACL injury. We don't know what extent to what this has happened and what's occurred, but she did this on Tuesday at training with the Mystics. It's honestly, I feel for her. I've suffered 2 ACL injuries, one on each knee. It is just the absolute worst. It's also just awful timing. She's just had this big, beautiful experience with the draft, being so successful. You're now entering your professional career, and to do it at training camp before the season has started, honestly, it's heartbreaking and I feel sick just talking about it. But Georgia, the whole of Australia is behind you. We hope you get back on court as soon as possible, that it's a speedy process, that you're not in too much pain. And I just think, for me, it makes you stronger. The comeback is always bigger than the setback. And I totally, absolutely believe in it. And I think it shows Paige Beckers did her ACL at college with UConn, and now she was drafted number 1. She looks great. She's back to playing her form of basketball. You had Cameron Brink, a rookie who was drafted number 2 last season. She did her ACL with the LA Sparks in the middle of the season of the W, and she's back looking fit, looking healthy, and it's absolutely awful, and it's sad to say that it's almost just a normal part of women's basketball, but best of wishes to you, Georgia. And yeah, like I said, all of Australia is behind you and backing you. Now let's sort of flip the script and let's talk about some good news that has come out of our fellow Aussies overseas. In Hungary, we saw Steph Reed take out the Hungarian national championship with her team Sopron. They held off Miskolc 54-48 in the Game 5 decider. It was down to the wire. Steph finished the game with a team-high 14 points and also had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1 steal. Steph will now be coming back home, and she will be representing the Opals in the Trans-Tasman Showdown next week. Another one of our fellow Aussies, Ezi Magbagor, she took out the Czech championship with her team Prague in a Game 3 to sweep the grand final. They were looking the goods from Game 1 to Game 3, never in doubt. Her team defeated Zabini Brno in a convincing 83-52 win. Ezi ended the game with 8 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 1 block. So Ezi has had a very successful European season, and she will now be going back to the WNBA to be with her team, the Seattle Storm, as they have all kicked off training camp this week. Another one we have to mention is Chloe Bibby. She was named the Spanish National League MVP after an amazing season at Girona. She led them to the top of the table, and she also averaged over the season 18.5 points, shooting at over 50%. That is amazing. Shot the 3 ball at over 40%, and then almost averaging about 5 rebounds and 2 steals a game. So she is also now back in the W at training camp with the Golden State Valkyries, and they will be kicking off their first ever WNBA campaign, and Chloe Bibby having another successful European season. So congrats, Chloe. Now I want to focus our attention back here in Australia is the new collective bargaining agreement. It is super exciting. Just the fact that we have a new CBA that is absolutely historic. The ABPA that we have spoken about, they have initiated and signed a 4-year collective bargaining agreement with the Women's National Basketball League. And I think we just have to go through a few of the points that are so huge. And I'm almost a bit speechless because there are women who paved the way before me who are in such a worse off spot compared to me. And then now we have this future generation coming in and, they're just so lucky to have what they have because you feel like, you've been fighting for this your whole career. So let's go through them. So there will be 104% increase in minimum wage, and the CBA has established a minimum wage pro rata parity with the men's NBL within the term. Massive, huge. The salary cap will increase 8% every year, reaching $724,000 by the 2028-29 season. And there will be a 314% increase in development players' wage, increasing to a minimum of around $16,500 also in the 2028-29 season. These things are it's a huge jump. It's amazing. You wouldn't see these type of increases in the corporate world, like I say, the normal world. But also in saying that, this has been a long time coming. And then I just also think it's super important to understand that, yes, it's obviously about a better pay with the wage increases, etc., the salary cap, but it's also about some core conditions that are even more important to all the pay. So I think it's important for people to know it's not just about the pay, but it's about creating a very professional environment like the NBL, like the WNBA, like the NBA. And we want to keep players safe, but we always want to keep players supported and really help them in that well-being space. So some of these major points include physios at every training, appropriate medical services, injury management and prevention. And that's one that you just think would be that should be automatic, but it's not. And it's crazy to see how successful our athletes have been not having this support day in, day out. There will also be an introduction of injury income protection, as well as increases in private health insurance and per diem, and then increased wellbeing funding, as well as increased services and support. So, like I said, this bit is truly, truly crucial. So now that we've spoken about all of this and the information, now it's time to get our guests on. I want to pick their brain and I want to see how they really feel about this and what it means to them. Our first special guest is an Olympian, also a former WNBL player. Let's welcome Tess Madgen. Tessie gal, thanks for coming on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's my absolute pleasure.
So I've just run down through this big historic moment of the new CBA, and I want to go back to it. It just really was in my mind, a moment where you were currently working with the ABPA. You came in to talk to me and my team I was currently playing with in the WNBL, and you were going through a big PowerPoint of all these potential new changes, what's definitely locked in, what we still have to work on. And you and I were crying/laughing at just some of these changes, one of them being the minimum wage. And you and I were just like dumbfounded we were talking to the younger crew on my team about your first contract, my first contract, what we were getting paid. And for us, like I said, we were crying, laughing about that. But this just shows how big these changes are.
Yeah, I don't think anyone will be surprised that I was crying while I was talking. So, no, but like you said, it was massive. It was a real pleasure going around to the WNBL clubs and being involved with that, because obviously just retiring, I was on usually the receiving end of those ABPA chats, and sometimes they were quite hard to listen to in terms of the ABPA were fighting for everything that the players wanted, but there was little to no buy-in from the other end. So to be able to go out there to the clubs and share that the league was investing in the players, and what the players have been fighting for so long was actually going to come to fruition was really amazing. And you were definitely the highlight to come out to, because you were just so passionate about it, as well as a delegate and a long-term advocate for what the players want. So, we started talking about this as players forever, since we've been in the league forever, but we really started talking about the change and what could happen when the ABPA came around to teams when I was playing for the Sydney Flames still at the end of 2024. And basically everything that the players said they wanted, and that was required for someone new to take over the league, Robin and Larry bought into. So it was really a full circle moment from, like you said, from when we first started in the league and, I was an MVP of my team and getting paid $4,000 to now development players get paid more than that. Minimum wage is, 5 times or nearly 6 times the amount of that. So, it's amazing.
And like you said, you have just been retired for under a year, and you, in your playing career, was such a big voice as a delegate for the ABPA in that time. So understanding all the time, the effort, the meetings and like video chats we were having with obviously the other players and the delegates from other teams, as well as the ABPA staff, everything that goes into it. Like, what's one word that you would say is just how happy you are to see all this transpire? Or it can be 5 words if one word's too hard.
I'm elated. Like, it's honest. I feel like euphoric's maybe a bit far, but somewhere between elated and euphoric. And one word to describe the process of being a player, and then ABPA, and how much, Larry, Robin and Jacob worked together to get this over the line, I'd say is exhausting. And then how much work the players had to do, just because I think as players, you often say, we would say the same thing year after year, because we were always having to negotiate a new CBA every single year. So just even having the 4-year CBA is enormous. That mental toll and the load of the delegates always having to go to the players, and the players coming back through the delegates and asking for things year on year that just weren't being delivered on. It's exhausting, and it takes its toll. And we see, players go through moments where they no longer want to be a delegate, because it does feel like you're doing a lot of work for very little reward. So huge credit to you, Coley, for sticking it out in the long run. But I think, even little girls coming into that want to be professional basketballers, or players that are coming into the league now who don't know how hard it was and how hard the veterans of the league had to fight for this. That was really evident going around and doing the talks as well. Like, it was so great you were in the room and being able to tell the younger players or the DPs about how hard it was to get to this point and how massive it is, I think is also enormous. So it's really, really cool. I think that now little girls growing up, they can see that they can be a basketballer as their profession, no matter whether they're the best person on the team or someone coming in as a development player or a minimum wage player. Everyone will be able to be paid enough so they can just focus on basketball. And then obviously, I think female athletes are amazing. We always juggle a whole different range of hobbies or jobs. Females in general do that. So now it can be more of a choice rather than a need to. Like, I need to work to be able to play basketball, when we can just focus now on playing basketball, give that everything it needs, the recovery, the nutrition, the sleep, and then obviously the time on court to be the best basketballers we can be is just massive.
And obviously there's been so many changes, and I ran through them a bit earlier, but for you, what's the most significant improvement that you're most pleased to see in place?
It's for sure got to be the minimum wage pay parity between the men and the women. I think I honestly never thought I'd see this happen. And
Yeah.
I know it's for minimum wage. It's not for all of the players yet, but it is a starting point. So, our top end players still aren't being paid what our male counterparts are being paid. But I think the minimum wage pay parity is a really great starting point to eventually get there. And it is hard being one of those players who's training all the time, not getting paid enough money, then having to go to work. So then they can't get better at basketball to actually, one day become a starter and get paid that amount of money. So I think just the standard across the league, I think, is going to improve with that as well. And, the Opals are already number 2 in the world. The WNBL is already such a great league, but I just can't wait to see it go to new heights with our players being able to be on the court more. And invest in themselves more. And then I think the other thing I'm so pleased about is obviously the salary cap improving with the minimum wage pay parity, but also the investment into player wellbeing. And as the league becomes more professional, it's going to come with new challenges. And I think player wellbeing really needs to be at the forefront of that. So that's the second thing I'm pretty pleased about.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's one that we go through so much. It's a roller coaster journey of being a professional athlete. So the fact that we're getting supported in that way for me was also a massive one and at the forefront. And I think you spoke on it a little bit, but do you think the new CBA will attract and retain more Australian players who might have previously looked to go overseas earlier in their careers now with this minimum wage increasing?
I think for sure. I really hope it does anyway. But, people often go to Europe to make more money and for more opportunities. So I think by increasing the pay for minimum wage, but also the salary cap as a whole, and, some different rules around marquee players, etc., we will hopefully get some of the players playing overseas back. And there are a lot of players playing overseas. So that's really exciting. And then, we obviously don't want to encourage people from going overseas. I was over there for a couple of seasons and would have loved to spend more time there, but I did my ACL. It's just such a great life experience. It definitely helped me become a better basketballer, but instead of having to go there now to earn what we are worth, it's now a choice. And hopefully it's more a lifestyle choice, becoming a better basketballer choice rather than I need to go there to make the most out of my playing career while it lasts.
Yeah, definitely love that word. It's a choice, because I feel like we as female athletes, probably /female basketball athletes, that's probably not a word I say we use often or have we're, allowed to actually have one. So that is good. But
spot on, Coley.
Right. As a leader and experienced player throughout your time, I guess what kind of message do you think this new CBA sends to aspiring female basketballers in Australia?
Yeah, really good question. And I love this. And I think that's, obviously it's great for the players in the league. Oh, sorry. No. I was doing so well.
This is good, though. I think this is so important to show how much it means to people and how much you've personally fought, as well as the whole basketball community, especially in the WNBL. So no, tears.
Thanks, Coley. Thanks.
Would it be a Tess Madgen interview if there were no tears?
Yeah, so thank you. I feel empowered, ready to go. So I think it's massive that young girls can now look, and, they're like young boys. They can look to the WNBL, the WNBA, and see that they can do that as their full-time job. And I think that is just so massive. I mean, I was very naive growing up, just thinking that all I wanted to do was play for the Opals. And so I knew I had to play WNBL, do as much in my basketball career as I could. I never really, knew that when I got there, it was going to be so hard to actually make that become a reality, because we were getting paid so little that I had to work, I had to study, I had to do all these other things that, my brothers, who were both professional athletes, didn't have to worry about. So it's huge that young girls can now look and see I can do that as my job when, they're sitting in the classroom or out at lunch playing basketball with the boys who know they can do that as their job. Now our young girls can as well.
I love that. And Oh, and no, it does get you emotional because like little us would have been like
Yeah,
so
exactly.
proud of us now, right?
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
do you believe this new CBA will make the WNBL more competitive and appealing to fans as well? And like, what ways do you think?
100%. I think the investment that Robin and Larry have made into the WNBL is massive, and we've seen what Larry has done with the NBL. So it's really a no-brainer for me that it will be more appealing for the fans, and I can't wait to see what they do with that. But like I touched on before, it will improve the league by players having less things to worry about away from basketball, and being able to be on the court more and invest in themselves as athletes more.
Yeah.
You and I have both been through, unfortunately, our fair share of injuries. And so it's not really, and for you, Bec, really unfortunately very early in your career, but it's not until you go through that you realize how much it takes to be as
Oh,
good as you can. And
yeah.
you know, we were forced to have to do it so we could play because otherwise our knees are not going to love it. But just imagine, you know, if I did that earlier in my career, how much longer I could have trained, played. And so I think by being able to spend more time on the court training is only going to make the product so much better.
Mm-hmm. And I guess now in saying that, what are your hopes and expectations for the WNBL in the next few years as a result of this new agreement?
Sorry, one thing I should have said, which goes perfectly into this, is getting those players back from Europe as well. I think will really bolster the league, and just improve. You know, when you're training and playing against the best people in the world every day, there's no doubt you're going to get better. So by
Mm-hmm.
having those players back in our environment, I think will be massive. And I think that's probably what I'm most looking forward to is having our Australians back here and getting some. We already do attract quite good imports because our league already has a great reputation, but being able to retain and attract great imports, I think, will be enormous. And then just seeing what this investment into our female basketballers actually does, and just seeing them be in a high performance environment. You know, it wasn't until I played WNBA that I actually felt like a professional basketballer. So just seeing the players' worth and their self-worth increase with that is going to be enormous.
It really is. And I think I want to finish on this last question because I feel like people like really, or even this younger generation coming through, I want to like paint a picture of what it was really like when we first came into the league, but also like the women paved the way before us were even worse, you know, worse off than us. And so if this new CBA had been in place earlier in your career, how do you think it might have influenced your decisions or your opportunities?
Well, really good question. To start this, I want to start with a story that Guy Malloy always reminds me of. You and I and Rebecca Allen were playing for the Melbourne Boomers, and we used to have to. We trained at a school from 6:30 to 8:30 every night. So already that's not the best environment to be in. And we had to sweep the court ourselves. We had to pick up, you know, half-eaten sandwiches and apple cores and banana peels off the bench where we were sitting. And then after one training, it was Christmas time, and the president of the club came in and asked us if we could sell cherries as a fundraiser, to make more money, generate more money for the club. Bec, I don't know if you remember that, but we're professional athletes. You know, trying to do our job the best as we can, already up against it. And then we're also being asked to, you know, sell fundraise because that's the dire straits that the league and our club was in.
Mhm.
So I think, yeah, I'm really happy with how my career panned out, my basketball career. You know, you and I were really, really hard workers, and I don't think there was anything that was ever going to stop us in reaching our basketball potential. But I know that's not the same for everyone, and so
Mhm.
that's what I'm more happy about, that equal playing field. But I'm, you know, now that I have retired and I was a captain of the Opals, and I had to start work basically a month after I got back from the Olympics to have enough money to live on. And I think, you know, any Boomers player that would have retired after that Olympics, they're millionaires. And so I think that's the part where I can't wait to see what this CBA does, is for just to set basketballers up for life after sport as well, so they can all hopefully feel as fulfilled within their career as I did, and make that transition a lot easier. You know, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. Obviously, if you can't tell, my passion is with young girls and women, and breaking down barriers for them to achieve their goals, which is why I love working with She Hoop so much. But I just feel like male athletes in general are set up a lot better for life after sport. And so I'm really, really excited for our basketballers now to also have that equal opportunity.
Oh, well, Tessie Gal, thank you so much for coming on today. I think just getting your insights, you were a player, a delegate, such a big advocate for this change. You did help pave a way as well. So you should be super proud for what you've done and, you know, your voice being heard. And yes, thanks again so much for coming on. It was just so great to chat about this new historic moment.
Thank you, Colleen. Thank you so much for all the work you've done as well. You're an absolute legend.
Thanks, Tessie Gal. We'll see you soon. Now let's welcome our next very special guest. She's an Olympian, former WNBL player, as well as a board member on the ABPA, Laura Hodges. Laura, thanks for coming on with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bec. It's a pleasure to be chatting with you.
So first and foremost, I just want to know, what does this new agreement and investment, I know that was a very significant word I heard you use when this was released. What does this mean to you?
Oh, it's huge for women's basketball, and there's so many elements to it. It's the people that paved the way beforehand, but then it's also the current players that are in the game right now, and then it's for the future as well. And thinking back to when I started playing in the WNBL and there was no minimum wage and people were doing it for free, or they're actually paying to play because they would have to pay for their own health insurance. And then that becomes a burden on female athletes because they are studying, they have to work, and then they lose the love of the game. So the fact that there's going to be more opportunity and better conditions means for future athletes, they won't give up the sport too early, especially for the people like the DPs who would literally just doing it for nothing. They actually have value and they are so important to a culture of a team, especially when you've got people playing big minutes and they have to step into training sessions, and when they're not getting valued financially, you see them towards the end of the season losing the love for the game. So that's what this agreement is all about, and obviously we need to keep striving for more opportunities, but it's really exciting that this second CBA has happened.
Amen, amen, amen is all I have to say to that. And you did point out, you know, a few major things that I have previously spoken on, but how long does this sort of deal take to get across the board? Like I said, you've been a board member, you've also been a big advocate for players and our rights, what we are worth. And then I guess who isn't involved in making this happen for people who don't really know?
Oh, it's a huge process behind the scenes, and for me, the first WNBL CBA, which was finalised in 2020, it was during a period of COVID. And I was actually pregnant with my second child, and it was the first time that I saw like the nitty gritty of it all. And, you know, he just hats off to Jacob Holmes, that what he's created for the ABPA and the opportunity, and to Greg O'Neill, who is a part of the board and just pushes all the time for women's basketball. But it's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of back and forwards. I wouldn't say it's always, this happy conversation. There's tough conversations, and it's going back to the clubs, to the players, back to the board, and sometimes there's a stalemate and you're at loggerheads, but you just have to keep fighting and pushing for what's right. And I know that first ever CBA, being pregnant, I felt like I actually had my daughter 3 weeks early, and I think because it was so stressful, and then it finally sort of, the end came and it was finally finalized. And I think a day later or 2 days later, I was actually giving birth. And
That's crazy.
I feel like that it's a collaborative thing. Obviously, the initial one was Basketball Australia, and then obviously the WNBL and the players and the clubs. But hats off to the people that do the nitty gritty work. And Jacob Holmes, he needs to, but there's a lot of people, there's lawyers, there's a lot going on. And then also you have to go back to the players, because it really is all about the players and what they need and what's appropriate for them for their future careers.
And I want to set the scene a little bit to show people like how far we've come. There's still such a long way to go, but this is a great big first step. So the first time you played in the WNBL was with the AIS, shout out, back at the Australian Institute of Sport, and that was for the 2000-2001 season. Set the scene. What were the conditions for you like then and in Adelaide when you were playing?
Oh, there's so many elements. One of the biggest things is we had triple headers. We played on a Friday night, a Saturday, and a Sunday.
That's illegal. No.
And then you don't have a physio. You don't have you don't even have 24 hours to recover. Things like that. And we didn't know any different. And I feel like when we had the triple headers, I was 16, 17 years old. And so my body could do it. But once in that mix of, late 20s, early 30s, and even at a young age, it's not good for your body and it doesn't produce the best quality basketball. But it's also things like the travel conditions, traveling the day of a game and then getting off a plane. And then I remember the first trip to Townsville, from Adelaide to Townsville, and then you have to somehow get rest, do a shoot around, and then play that same day. Those types of things is crazy to me. But the biggest thing for me was sort of towards the end of my career was those players that there was no minimum wage and they're literally doing it for nothing. And yeah, those people, I was fortunate enough throughout my career that I started to get paid better, and I went to Europe and I realized what kind of money could change the way for me as an athlete. So yeah, just so many different elements across all of it. And it's lovely when you, it's not lovely, but you hear the players that played in the 70s and the 80s, and they're like literally fundraising to play in the WNBL. And that's just, they've paved the way, and they were such amazing athletes. And you think of the Opals, that the first ever trip that they went on a ship and they had to literally make a court up. And now we are, for the Opals, traveling business class, but going back to the WNBL, the conditions are just so much better to get good quality basketball on the court.
And it is impressive to see, I think, how long athletes actually lasted and played up until, their early to mid 30s, considering these conditions. Like, it actually is wild to think you had to endure all of that and you still played to such an elite level, played overseas. It is so wild. And like you were saying, actually putting a good product on the floor. How do you see the new CBA affecting the overall professionalism and the perception of the WNBL?
It's so important that this new CBA has been put in place, because it's just going to grow the athletes, and then it's also going to help them on the court with things like physios at training, and having that made sure that good quality travel conditions. There's so much that goes in with that, but it's the young players that are just starting the game, the 7, the 8-year-olds that are seeing that women can be professional in this light, and it means that they've got something to strive to, and it can be a career within itself. And I think that is one huge thing that's going to make an impact, because they know that they can play in Australia. They don't have to travel to overseas to make money. And so that for me is really special.
I couldn't agree more. One of my next questions was going to be about, the development pathways and this next generation of basketball athletes. And I don't think you could have said it better, is that this is actually a reality. I can choose basketball and it's my choice to go that way and be a professional. Whereas I think we've been losing some younger kids to the likes of netball, cricket, AFLW, all of that. So the fact they can now be like, when I grow up, I want to be a basketball player and I have the choice to do so. I think little us, and I think my heart flutters a bit being able to hear that. And in saying that, I guess, what message do you think this CBA sends about the value and the importance of the Australian basketball community?
Well, you've said it there with value, like the female athletes are being valued, and that is so important. And it's, you and I have gone through it. It's a tough gig sometimes. Like it's so amazing that we can play basketball and that be our job, but it's not always easy.
No.
There's, the bad losses, there's the injuries. But when you know that you've been valued financially and off the court, especially with the input in like more well-being side of it, where you can go and speak to psychologists in all different facets, and there's funding there for that. That's so important, because you're not left alone on this little island, and it is a team sport, but sometimes you can feel like in your moment you're not playing well, or things like that. So putting those things into a CBA is so important. And, I wouldn't change my career one shape at all, but I would love to go back to that, being that little kid and doing it over again in this next generation, because it really is exciting.
It is. And I think mental health and well-being is obviously a lot bigger now than it was in your playing career, even at the start of my playing career. And you put it right. It's a roller coaster of a journey through the WNBL national teams, and the fact that we have that support to lean back on. Like, this new generation coming through the WNBL are only now realizing that's available to them, and the fact they have those resources is super important to get the best out of players. Because if we're the best internally, mind, body, soul, well, then we can produce the best product on the court for the fans, and the WNBL will just grow and grow. And so for you, having been involved in the WNBL for so long, and I guess you've just been a big advocate from the get-go for the players, what are your just overall feelings about the direction that now the league is going to take with this CBA in place?
There's so many exciting elements. I think that, there is new change coming within the whole league, and having the NBL being part of that, and supporting, obviously, Basketball Australia as well, still for a period of time and as it's going along. And I've been fortunate enough to do the radio commentary for a lot of the Sixers games, and to see the sellout stadiums every game is just exciting for basketball. And I want that for women's basketball as well. And we're getting there, with the ball's starting to roll. But I feel like things like this, to make this league so much more professional with the collective bargaining agreement, I think it's being a focus. It's the media's out there, and you then need bums on seats to watch these amazing female athletes. So I feel that the change is coming, and that's so important in so many avenues. And I can't wait for the future. But for an athlete in itself, they can work on themselves on the court, then they can do, there's that support with doing stuff off the court in study or work or jobs, and that's where that wellbeing part comes to it. And then it's just a collective, it's really, really exciting. I hope I get to see you keep playing for a long period of your career. But like you said, it's not easy. And I remember actually the first time I met you, Bec, was at the AIS, and it was an Opals camp, and your smile was infectious. And I know that you were injured, I think, at that time with a knee injury, but you were just so excited to have the Opals in town, and you were chatting to all of us. And I wish I had some of your enthusiasm when you're in the mix of the Opals camp. But people like you deserve to be able to have the best. And a CBA like this, it strives for the best. So it can't be anything but positive.
Oh, you're such just a beautiful human, and we love as players what you have done to pave the way for us, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if you didn't come before me and build this amazing foundation. So on behalf of me, I say thank you very much, Laura. And I love that you're a board member as well, and you're still fighting, for the players. And I just think you said it, the change is coming, and I totally think that the time is now. And I also can't wait to see what happens, in this next few years as well. But I just want to say thank you so much for coming on board and sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks, Bec. It's been a pleasure.
It's so great to see that this new CBA is just the big first step in positive change in the WNBL. It's huge. And obviously, like we said, the increase in salary for clubs as well as players, but it just goes beyond that, and it gives a positive impact on players' lives and their careers. And so big news. I can't wait to see what the future holds in this space for the WNBL. So thanks so much for joining me today, team. Tune in next week as we talk things basketball all around the globe. It's a Cole Well.